Welcome to today's deep dive. Usually when we hear the phrase distortion field, we immediately picture like some charismatic tech CEO standing on a stage in a black turtleneck.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right, like they speak and suddenly reality just sort of bends around them. You find yourself actually believing that a smartphone is going to revolutionize human consciousness, or I don't know, that we'll all be commuting to Mars by next Tuesday.
Yeah, it's like a localized warping of reality.
Exactly. It's this temporary warping of how we see the world, driven entirely by one person's sheer force of will.
And, we really tend to recognize it in those very specific, isolated environments.
Yeah.
And to some extent, we even celebrate it in business as a marker of visionary leadership.
We do, but the sources we are unpacking today take that concept, the distortion field, and apply it to something much older, much wider, and honestly, much more invisible.
hmm
We are looking at a deeply philosophical text today. It explores what it actually takes to genuinely trust and have faith in a woman within a society that is, well, structurally wired against it.
Right.
And because these sources touch on historically heavy frameworks regarding patriarchy, power, and gender, let's just be clear right up front. As your guides on this deep dive, we aren't here to take political sides.
No, not at all.
We are just mapping the author's architecture. We want to understand the mechanics of these arguments so you, the listener, can see the concepts for yourself.
And the central mechanic the author wants us to examine is a major narrative pivot.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, usually we talk about patriarchy as a really straightforward top-down system of oppression, like a set of rules.
Right.
But this text argues it functions more like an atmospheric fog. It actively distorts the perception of women, rendering them, by the system's own definition, inherently untrustworthy.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if we are, walking around inside a cultural fog that alters how we perceive a massive portion of the population, we really need to know what we're actually looking at. The text emphasizes this idea of a real woman, not as a biological definition, but as a rejection of performance. And what jumped right off the page for me was the author's assertion that society demands a woman be legible in order to be trusted.
Legibility is huge here.
It really made me think about how we interact with machines. Like when you walk up to a vending machine, you expect perfect legibility. You insert a specific input, a dollar bill, and you expect a highly predictable, pleasant, easily understandable output. A soda.
Right, it's transactional.
Completely transactional. If you put your dollar in and the machine shakes, makes a weird noise, and hands you a handful of wet soil, you don't trust that machine anymore. You just think it's broken.
What's fascinating here is how that metaphor applies to humanity. Because when a vending machine gives you soil, you don't just, walk away.
No, you get mad.
Right, you call the manufacturer to get it repaired,
Yeah.
or you unplug it, or you have it hauled off to the junkyard. And the text argues society does the exact same thing to a human being who defies legibility. Yeah, because patriarchal value relies so heavily on interpretability. Softness, service, predictability. So when a woman displays her messy, unpredictable, complex interior life,
Which is just being human.
exactly. But it isn't just read as a mechanical failure. It is read as an active, structural threat that needs to be managed or dismantled.
Because a real person is a complex ecosystem, not a vending machine.
Yeah.
I mean, an ecosystem has storms, it has decay, it has periods of wild overgrowth.
Right.
You can't just put a coin in an ecosystem and expect a perfectly packaged product designed specifically for your comfort.
And that is exactly where the concept of trust breaks down in this framework.
How so?
Well, if your trust is contingent on her acting as a predictable mechanism for your comfort, you aren't actually trusting a person, you are trusting a function.
Oh, that's a sharp distinction. Trusting a function versus trusting a person.
Right. To truly trust her means accepting the parts of her full humanity that do not serve you, the parts that do not flatter you, and that might not even make, logical sense to you in the moment.
So, if an ecosystem is viewed as a systemic threat to a world that desperately wants vending machines, the system has to have a way of neutralizing that threat, right?
It does.
The text outlines what it calls an architecture of mistrust. These are the specific lenses, like the filters within the distortion field that pre-interpret behavior. And the author lays out 5 specific archetypes.
Yeah, let's look at how these actually manifest, because they are essentially mental folders we use to categorize complex behavior so we don't have to really engage with it.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first archetype is the hysteric.
Ah.
Under this lens, a woman's perceptions are treated as symptoms of emotional instability rather than, observations of truth.
Right. So let's say we were in a corporate environment. A woman points out a massive structural flaw in a project plan that everyone else missed.
Happens all the time.
And the response isn't, oh, let's investigate this flaw. The response is, you seem really stressed lately, or you're getting overly emotional about this deliverable.
Exactly. The distortion field perfectly deflects the critique. The problem magically shifts from the project to her emotional state.
So what's the second filter?
The second filter is the seductress. Here, her motives are inherently suspect.
Ah, okay.
Whatever she does, there is an underlying assumption of manipulation. Like, if she is successfully networking, she isn't building professional capital, she is using her charms, or she has a hidden agenda.
Wow, so she can't just be good at her job.
Nope. And the third is the mother, where her goodness is entirely conditional on her absolute selflessness.
Oh, I see this one constantly.
Right.
The moment the mother archetype expresses a boundary, like the moment she says, I cannot take on this extra emotional labor for the team, or I just need an hour to myself, she completely plummets from grace.
Yeah, she's suddenly viewed as selfish or withholding.
Exactly. It's so rigid. What's the fourth?
We hit the fourth archetype, which the text actually argues is one of the most common disciplinary tools.
The shrew.
The shrew. This is the frame where a woman's intelligence, her assertiveness, or even just her clear communication is instantly recategorized as aggression, the exact moment it inconveniences someone.
It's that classic maneuver, you know? I'm not debating the merit of your argument. I'm going to tone police how you delivered it.
Oh, totally.
You might have the facts completely on your side, but because you didn't, smile while delivering them, you were labeled difficult or abrasive.
Yeah, you're just difficult. And that brings us to the fifth, which really seems to tackle power outside the traditional system.
The witch.
Right,
Oh, wow.
the witch. This frame suggests that any power a woman holds that doesn't flow through sanctioned traditional channels is inherently dangerous.
Give me an example of that.
So if she has a deep intuition about a new hire, or if she wields informal influence in a community without holding an official title, that power must be supervised, it's second-guessed, or ultimately marginalized.
Okay, I have to pause here and just admit some real skepticism. Because the author claims these frames operate entirely below the level of intention, like we absorb them through media tropes, language, childhood stories, all of it.
Right, it's ambient.
But if that's true, isn't the author just giving us an impossible task? I mean, how can you or I possibly dismantle a mental filter we don't even know we are using?
It's a fair question.
How can we fix something that is completely subconscious? Like, how often are we, the listener included, hearing someone's truth but automatically filing it into one of these 5 mental folders without realizing it?
Probably all the time. But think of it like realizing you've been wearing tinted glasses your entire life without knowing it.
Okay.
You can't just wish the glasses away. But once someone points out that the sky isn't actually green, you can start interrogating your own vision.
That makes sense.
The author argues that trusting a real woman requires profound structural self-awareness. You have to learn the shape of these archetypes so well that you can catch your own brain in the act of filing a woman's truth into the shrew or hysteric folder.
So we have to constantly audit our own mental reflexes.
Exactly.
But even if we start catching those reflexes, how do we rebuild something positive? If the soil of society is just poisoned with these archetypes, how do we grow anything real?
Well, the text provides a fascinating pathway here by drawing a very sharp line between two concepts we usually treat as synonyms, trust and faith.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because those aren't the same thing, are they?
Not at all. This is perhaps the most crucial distinction in the entire text. Trust is relational, and it is strictly evidence-based.
Right.
You trust someone because they have a proven track record of reliability over time. Faith, on the other hand, operates on a completely different axis.
How so?
Faith is extended in advance of proof. It is a willingness to bet on someone's interior goodness, their capacity, and their perception, even when you cannot verify it from the outside.
See, here's where it gets incredibly clear for me. If we use a financial analogy, trust is like a credit score.
Yes.
It is based purely on past, verifiable, documented data. You pay your bills on time for 5 years, your score goes up. The bank trusts you because the math says they are legally safe to do so.
Right, it's low risk.
But faith is like seed funding a startup. You invest in a founder because you believe in their vision, their intellect, and their drive, long before there is a physical product to show the board. You are betting entirely on unproven potential.
That's a perfect analogy.
So why does the text argue that society refuses to give women this seed funding of belief?
Well, let's look at your credit score analogy. For a woman in a patriarchal system, the bank is checking her score every single day, and the slightest dip freezes all her accounts.
Oh, wow.
The author calls these perpetual audits. A male founder might get seed funding based on a napkin sketch and a charismatic pitch.
We see that all the time.
All the time. But a female founder is asked to produce 3 years of audited financials for a company that doesn't even exist yet. Her visionary capacities, the exact things you want in a leader, are framed as impractical or naive until they are validated by a male-coded authority.
So she is granted zero margin for error.
Exactly. Zero margin. So extending faith to a woman, presuming she has depth and authority before she hands over a mountain of evidence, is actively working against the cultural default.
It's a radically disruptive act, then.
It really is. To have faith in a woman is to say, I believe your perception is real before I can verify it. I believe you know something worth following. The entire architecture of the distortion field runs on the opposite presumption.
Which is, you know nothing of value until you prove it to my exact satisfaction.
Precisely.
Okay, so if we accept that we need to extend the seed funding of faith, how does that actually translate to, Tuesday morning at the office or Thursday night at the dinner table?
Right, practically speaking.
Yeah. The text argues we can't just project this desire outward, we have to do an inner audit.
The inner audit is where the philosophy turns into daily practice. And this applies to everyone, regardless of gender, because we all marinate in the same cultural fog.
So what does this audit look like?
The author demands we confront some highly uncomfortable biases. For instance, do you inherently believe women are more emotional than rational? And critically, do you treat emotional as evidence of unreliability?
Oh, we absolutely do that. We equate a complete lack of emotion with objectivity.
Yes.
Like, if someone is coldly reciting facts, we assume they are telling the truth, which is wild because a sociopath can coldly recite facts.
It's such a flawed metric. Another part of the audit requires looking at how we distribute what the text calls interpretive charity.
Let's define that, because interpretive charity sounds like, academic jargon, but it's incredibly common in reality.
Yeah.
It's the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
Like, if your male boss sends a blunt, one-word email that just says fix, you assume he's just incredibly busy and focused on the big picture. He gets interpretive charity.
Right, he's just being efficient.
But if your female boss sends that exact same one-word email, you assume she's angry with you, or she lacks communication skills, or she's acting like a shrew.
That is the perfect example. You assume structural competence for one and emotional volatility for the other.
Yeah.
The inner audit also forces us into a highly consequential area, believing women's perceptions of harm, discomfort, or injustice.
Yes, the text really hovels here, and it's heavy.
It is.
The author argues that systematic disbelief isn't just an accidental byproduct of bad listeners. It is a dedicated maintenance mechanism for the distortion field. Like, if a woman accurately perceives exploitation in her workplace or her relationship and she names it out loud, she becomes a threat to the structure. So the structure protects itself by labeling her the problem.
It's an incredibly effective defense mechanism. If you can use the hysteric or the witch archetype to discredit the person pointing out the structural flaw, you never actually have to fix the flaw.
You just eliminate the messenger.
Exactly. The system survives by making her the scapegoat.
But to counteract this, the text demands we sit with what it calls epistemological discomfort. And I really have to push back again here.
Go for it.
The author is essentially asking us to admit that our very definition of what counts as evidence might be flawed. That breaks the rules of basic logic I use to navigate reality.
It's like a massive shift.
It's a massive pill to swallow. If I can't rely on linear proof, what am I supposed to rely on? This feels like it's asking us to abandon critical thinking altogether. What happens if we fail to do this?
Well, it's not asking you to abandon critical thinking. It's asking you to recognize that what you've been taught as objective evidence is often just a set of rules written by the people who built the system.
Okay, I hear that.
Epistemological discomfort means accepting that she might be seeing a very real pattern or dynamic that you simply cannot see from your vantage point. Her inability to prove it to you in a format you prefer doesn't render it false.
Right.
And when we refuse to sit with that discomfort, we end up committing what the author calls quiet betrayals.
quiet betrayals, what does that actually look like in practice?
It doesn't usually look like a dramatic stabbing in the back.
Hmm.
A quiet betrayal in a marriage, for example, might look like trusting your partner with all the emotional management of the household, but secretly doubting her financial acumen.
Ah, just waiting for a mistake.
Exactly, waiting for her to make a budgeting mistake so your internal bias feels justified. In a boardroom, it looks like holding a female colleague's competence at a slightly lower baseline than a man's, demanding just one more data point from her than you would from him.
Wow.
It is conditional approval masquerading as trust.
It's the thousand tiny cuts of skepticism.
Yeah.
So this inner audit helps us in moments of conflict or when evaluating competence. But the text takes this faith a step further, applying it to how a woman moves through the entirety of her life, even when she's not at her absolute peak. The author talks about trusting the seasons.
Trusting the cycle, not just the crest. Patriarchal culture only wants to trust the crest of the wave.
Right.
It wants the woman when she is performing at full output, when she is fully legible, radiating energy, and, fully available to serve the needs of others.
It's like someone claiming they are a massive nature lover, but they only actually love the middle of July.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like, they love the warm weather, the blooming flowers, the long days. But the second November hits, the leaves fall, the air gets biting cold, and the animals hibernate, this person gets furious.
Yeah, they feel cheated.
They start yelling at the trees, demanding to know why they aren't producing fruit anymore. They assume the forest is fundamentally broken and needs to be fixed. But the forest isn't broken. It's in contraction. It's resting. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
That is exactly the dynamic. A woman who retreats isn't broken. Her contraction isn't a mechanical failure, and it certainly isn't a withdrawal of love. Trusting her requires epistemic humility.
There's another big term. Walk us through epistemic humility in this context.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it means humbling yourself enough to accept that your linear, logical way of knowing the world isn't the only valid way.
Okay.
The text asks the reader to tolerate unliteral knowing, because women are frequently condemned for knowing things in ways that resist linear proof.
Like what?
Take somatic intelligence, the physical gut feeling of a room's tension, or the immediate bodily sense that a situation is unsafe.
Right, that feeling you just can't always explain with a spreadsheet.
Exactly. Faith in a real woman means not demanding she translate that deep, unlittle knowing into a bulleted PowerPoint presentation just to satisfy your need for logical comfort.
That really shifts the burden. It stops demanding she make herself legible to the machine and instead demands we learn to read the ecosystem.
Wonderfully said.
But I want to zoom out because the conclusion of the text makes a massive leap. We've gone from vending machines and credit scores to ecosystems and unliteral knowing. So what does this all mean? How does the author tie all of these interpersonal concepts into the grand thesis?
The author pulls everything together by arguing that beneath the political struggle is a sacred one.
A sacred one.
Yes. Why did society demand this perfect legibility in the first place? The text points to the historical suppression of the feminine principle in cosmology itself.
Cosmology meaning our fundamental understanding of the origin and structure of the universe.
Exactly. The text argues that thousands of years ago, there was a systemic erasure of the sacred feminine.
Great.
The archetype of the goddess was demoted from a primary creator of the world to a mere helper, a sidekick, or just an ornament.
Wow, so it goes all the way back.
It goes way back. And because of that ancient cosmological demotion, trusting a real woman today is not just a modern workplace initiative or some political gesture.
What is it then?
It is a spiritual restoration. When you have faith in her unliteral knowing, when you trust her cycles and her seasons, instead of demanding the crest of the wave, you are participating in the small, daily restoration of an ancient intelligence that patriarchy has spent millennia dismantling.
It's a restoration project. That is a profoundly sweeping way to view a daily interaction.
It really is.
To recap the immense journey we've been on today, we started by naming the distortion field, that cultural fog that frames a woman's natural complexity as a threat.
Right.
We unpacked the architecture of mistrust, specifically how those 5 archetypal folders, the hysteric, the seductress, the mother, the shrew, and the witch, operate to neutralize her truth. We explored the radical difference between trust, which demands a perfect, verifiable credit score, and faith, which provides the seed funding of belief before the evidence even arrives.
That was a huge pivot.
Yeah. We confronted the highly uncomfortable inner audit, looking closely at our own quiet betrayals. And finally, we looked at the necessity of trusting the winter just as much as the summer.
Beautifully summarized.
And as a quick reminder to you, our listener, while we have completely immersed ourselves in the author's philosophical arguments today, our role here was simply to map out the landscape of these ideas. We were just holding up the very complex mirror that this text provides so you can consider what it reflects in your own life and relationships.
And, this raises an important question, something that I think will really linger long after this deep dive ends.
What's that?
Well, the text argues that trusting a woman helps restore an ancient cyclical cosmology, and that our modern linear concept of objectivity was actually built from the ground up to exclude unliteral intelligence.
Right.
It really makes you wonder if the very definition of evidence that we worship in our society is structurally biased. What other undisputed facts of our daily lives, our workplaces, and our relationships are actually just inherited archetypes masquerading as truth?
What an incredible question to leave on. Are we seeing reality, or are we just staring at the distortion field? Next time you find yourself demanding that someone act like a perfectly legible vending machine, maybe take a step back and appreciate the ecosystem instead. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the lenses through which you view the world, and we'll catch you next time.